For hundreds of years, people from all walks of life have reported sightings of a large hairy animal walking on 2 feet. The scientific community has dismissed these sightings as hoaxes, hallucinations, or misidentified bears. But is there another option? Is it possible that there is an ape, the largest of the great apes, unrecognized and unclassified by modern science, roaming the forest of North America? Please join us as we seek the answer to this compelling question. You have arrived at the intersection of myth and science, of fact and folklore. You have arrived at Bigfoot Crossing.
Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to Bigfoot Crossing. Thank you for being with us today. I'm Michael William. My good friend Daryl Williams with us. How are you, Daryl?
Hey, Michael. Good to have you back here on the hunt.
Yeah, always good to be on the hunt. And
back at the intersection.
The intersection of myth and science, of fact and folklore, brought to you by the good folks at Think Before You Drink. Kangen water, think before you drink. www.thinkbeforeyoudrink.us.
I even like the music on this show.
I'll tell you what, whoever picked this music out was sharp.
I can just see Bigfoot coming through the mist when I hear that music.
It's sort of ominous sounding, isn't it? I like that. I think it fits the show very well. We've got a good show lined up for today, and I appreciate everybody tuning in. But I wanted to take a moment to explain about last week. We did cut the show short, 30 minutes last week, and I was just deluged, Daryl, with a veritable hailstorm of text messages and phone calls, wondering why we'd cut the show short last week. And so,
well, I hope you blamed me.
Well, you know what a lot of folks don't understand, I think, out there, Daryl, is and folks that you may not understand, is that Daryl Williams is one of the high muckety mucks here at WAKM
What
Radio.
was my title again?
High muckety muck.
Sounds impressive.
And there was there was a meeting of the high muckety mucks last week, which conflicted with the last 30 minutes of the show, and so we cut the show short.
I thought you were doing me the favor. I thought I was doing you the favor. I thought you were short on material.
Well, it all worked out.
Okay. Well, we got the full hour today.
We got the full hour today, and we have a great guest lined up on the show, and we're looking forward very much to talking to him. But today's also another important day in cryptozoological history. It's May 2nd, and in 1933, let me pull it up on my phone here.
On this date in history?
On this date in history, May 2nd, 1933, the legend of the Loch Ness Monster spread into the modern world. The Inverness, we were talking about this before the show, exactly how to pronounce that. A local newspaper in Scotland published an account of a local couple who had claimed to see the Loch Ness Monster. The story was picked up, spread across Europe, and a legend and sightings that have gone back to 500 AD finally made the mainstream news on this day in 1933.
Now, someone's, and I won't say who, someone said it must have been a slow news day.
Well, that's right. It could have been. That's why I think that the Bigfoot story got so much traction in 1958. It was a slow news day, and the wire services picked up this story from the Humboldt Times with a picture of Jerry Crew holding one of those 17-inch long casts of a footprint. And I think that if it hadn't been a slow news day, if something else had happened, it might have gotten bumped off of the wire services, and so that sort of thing happens, and it's serendipitous, and so we have thanks to a slow news day, we have Bigfoot and we have the Loch Ness Monster as both as worldwide phenomenons, and certainly people on in Scotland and in the United States searching for Bigfoot searching for the Loch Ness Monster in Scotland. And there was a story recently that this company had just finished scanning Loch Ness, and they didn't find any trace of the Loch Ness Monster. But what they did find was a well, what am I trying to say? Not a set, but it was a creation for a movie about the Loch Ness Monster. It was a mechanical Loch Ness Monster that they was supposed to float in the lake, and they were going to use it for this film, and it sank.
Oh.
So they actually found that on the floor of Loch Ness. That was in the news a few days ago. So. There's always something in the news, and
a prop.
A prop. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And it was a prop that they were going to use for the movie, and it sank. It was supposed to float, but it didn't. And so we have the Loch Ness Monster. Today's Loch Ness Monster Day, I suppose.
Loch Ness and Bigfoot. I mean, those are kind of the big two, aren't there? Can you think of any? Are there any more?
Yeah, I think that's really the Yeti, which is related to Bigfoot, but the abominable snowman, or the Yeti in Nepal and in the Himalayas, and really that's the main two. I've got my shirt on here, and it's got my Don't Stop Believing shirt, and it's an image of Bigfoot wearing a sombrero while riding on the back of the Loch Ness Monster.
He's astride the Loch Ness Monster on your T-shirt.
And it says "Don't Stop Believing" at the bottom. And of course, the sombrero is symbolic of the chupacabra, which is a cryptozoological animal from down in Mexico. But at any rate, we have a great show today. We've got Larry Merritt with us, and we're going to call him. Daryl, if you'll give him a call. He was actually on the show. Was it last week or week before? And we really appreciate him, and we're going to get him on the line here.
And we spoke to him a few weeks ago, and he kind of had a connection to a piece of Bigfoot history.
He really does. He grew up in Yakima, Washington, which is where Roger Patterson lived, and actually knew Roger Patterson. And so we're looking forward to hearing from him today. Okay, Larry, are you there?
How you doing?
There he is, Michael.
Yeah, Larry, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and it's enjoyable to get to talk to somebody about the Bigfoot incident, that happened, and it made headlines, and ever since it's just stuck. It never went away. After I was taken of it, and that was back in 1967, and you got to realize back then they didn't have any like that. For that old of a film, it stayed around and it made history.
It really has. It's really made its stamp. We were talking at the opening of the show about Bigfoot really making the news in 1958 with the Bluff Creek track cast that Jerry Crew brought and showed the news, but really it was the Patterson film that sort of galvanized Bigfoot.
The thing was before Roger came along, Bigfoot was known in the Northwest as the Native Americans Sasquatch, and it was documented in their ancient writings in some of the places out there. They even show where they have it carved in rocks. And this is way before civilization, so it's not something that just somebody created in the modern world trying to make something out of it. This has been known through history,
It sure has. It sure has.
So, that's what gives it credibility about it. Because of that reason, if it was just something that somebody came up with, out of the blue, then most people say, yeah, right. But this has actually got documents of the Native Americans that spoke about it through centuries.
Yeah, exactly. There have been centuries of Native American interaction with this animal, and they've. One of these days, I'm going to come on the show and I'm going to have the whole list of Native American names and read them off. I'll probably mispronounce most of them terribly, but it's amazing. Every tribe has a different name for this creature, but they're all talking about the same creature.
Exactly. Yeah, and where I'm from, up in the northwest Washington State, and then in British Columbia, Sasquatch was always the name that everybody has more of a scientific type name rather than just Bigfoot, because nowadays you hear Bigfoot everywhere. You hear it on cartoons, you hear it on monster trucks and everything, but it was, and they used, also you heard the name, they used the word hairy ape, and that comes to mind of, how Bigfoot migrated, they think, from across the Barrens, that area all the way down into the northwest, all the way down, so
right.
There's
across the land bridge there, around the Bering Strait, there was a land bridge that appeared for a while, and a lot of animals migrated that way into the United States.
Exactly. And a lot of people use they say, it's a missing link, and I never did, do the studies that the missing link. I don't go by that because I believe in the Creator.
Yes, sir.
And the Creator, it's just a ape creature, just like the mountain gorilla. It wasn't discovered until 1909. Exactly.
And that's why in a lot of the early reports in the United States that predated the discovery of the gorillas, when a Sasquatch or Bigfoot sighting made the newspapers, they called it a wild man,
right?
Because they didn't really have anything to compare it to. And then after gorillas were discovered, they started calling it an ape, which is what it is. It's an ape that's walked on 2 feet ever since God created it.
And just like the Yeti, it's got they say like it's got tracks, but the toes are different. They've got to realize the Yeti's in an area where they have to do a lot of climbing on cliffs and things like that. So it's got a different,
It's got a different terrain to walk
so
over.
To adapt to that area.
Exactly. Well, tell me about your background in the Pacific Northwest.
Well, I was born in Yakima. My father and my mother, they were actually from Arkansas, but they moved to Northwest with their families back right after the Depression. Everybody settled into California or Washington State for work.
Right.
So they came from Arkansas, and my dad got in. He went into the Army, but before he went in the Army, he rodeoed, and he was friends with Roger back when he was a kid. And this is back in the early 50s. They used to ride rodeos together, and Roger was just a good friend of his through the years. And then later on, my dad got in the music business, and he started playing around the Northwest, and he ended up playing with Gene Vincent, the one that had the song Bebop-A-Lula.
Oh, yeah.
And Dad we went to California and lived in Hollywood. We lived down in Hollywood. Dad recorded with Gene on Capitol Records. And he performed around the Northwest. When he came back, he started performing around the Northwest. He did tours with Johnny Cash and opened shows for him and Bobby Darin and different people. But Roger came back to see Dad one time, and this is like in the 60s. I was probably about 8 years old around that time, and he just got a hold of Dad out of the clear blue, and he was an old friend anyway, and he came to our house, and he was carrying this track like this like a cast you do with plaster Paris.
Yes.
He had that cast in his hand. He knocked on the door. And he came to the door. I'll never forget this. And he said, Dad said, "How you been doing, Roger?" He came in, and he had his cowboy hat on, and he sat down there and he started talking. And he started telling Dad about this Bigfoot thing, and he just went crazy over it. He was just ate up. But he said, "Man, this is something." And he just was crazy over this Bigfoot. He just couldn't do anything but just think about this Bigfoot. And Dad was saying, "What are you going to do, Rod?" He said, "I'm going to try to start doing start looking for this thing, doing in the Northwest." So he was really looking for it, actually looking for it. I mean, he was driving, taking trips to different places, and he was also going to California later on. He went to California. That's where he got the film of it, but he just went crazy over it. He said it was driving him nuts, is what it was, because after he went and found out about this thing, I think he went to California and found out about that's where he got the track at, and when he came back, he was that's all he could think of,
Wow.
So Roger was a really unique person. He was a really inventive type person. He was doing some inventions that he was making on some, like a kid type toy. And he came down to Hollywood when we were down there, living down there, and he didn't come down there for the Bigfoot at all. He just came down there to try to promote this toy that he had, that he was inventing. And
Okay.
then he came back home. We moved back to Yakima again, and then Roger started contacting Dad and saying, "Hey, let's set up an office. I'd like to try to get involved with Bigfoot." My dad was interested in it, and before you know it, Roger was. We lived out in the country, in a place called the Tannum, out past a place called Wiley City, and it was pretty undeveloped area out there, and there was a lot of sightings that a lot of people were seeing maybe around that area. So Roger, he lived from us 7 miles up the road, and his kids became, they were my friends. I stayed at their house, and but he started setting up lookout places around that area, trying to find. I used to go with him, and
Cool.
And he would just constantly looking for it. That's what his goal was,
Yeah.
And he was trying to say maybe I could tranquilize one, because the thing was no one wanted to shoot one because it looks almost like a human being,
Right.
And,
Right.
In Skamania, Washington, they do have a law in their courthouse. It's there today. If anyone shoots Bigfoot, they would go to prison and pay some big fine. And this is not I actually believe they actually put that there because there was a lot of sightings. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people thought it was a joke, but it really wasn't a joke.
Well, and they wanted to protect the animal, and that law still is on the books.
It is. It really is. My daughter lives in a place called Washougal, Washington. It's real close there, and I mean those mountains over there are rugged. I mean, but they go down to this little festival they have every year down there, and they have the Bigfoot Festival, and they have gifts and different things. She always gets me T-shirts with Bigfoot on it and keychains and stuff like that.
Yeah, cool.
But Roger, like I said, he was so involved in trying to find this thing. I used to go with him and ride with him, and he was. I mean, if somebody said they saw Bigfoot, he always carried a little tape recorder with him, one of those little bitty portable ones he used, like the little reel-to-reel.
Uh-huh.
He would take that with him wherever he went, and if he heard somebody that saw Bigfoot, this is how much Roger was. He would go to their house and he would ask them. They said they saw it, and the word got out. So he would go there and he would sit there and he would interview them all day long. I'm not talking about like an hour. I mean, he would spend all day, because I used to go there with him and his son, and we were kids and we were so bored. We'd go outside and play. We'd go back in, and it just went on all day long.
Wow.
And so that's how much Roger. People thought, well, he just made a film and he wanted to cash in on some big money, and it wasn't like that with Roger. He was really, he was so involved in trying to find it.
It was almost an obsession with him.
It was not like people thought. I was with him. He would ask so many questions, and if you went out in the woods, he was constantly looking on the ground for tracks, and he would look for hair in the trees. He was just just a real scientist as far as trying to find it. So he finally got that clip of it. You know, he'd go down to California, and there's a lot of big sightings down there. It was well known for Bigfoot in the Northwest. I mean, down in Northern California,
right?
Which Northern California is rugged mountains. You got Mount Shasta and all the big. So he'd go down there. When you hear the word California, you think of palm trees, but it's Northern California. So when he would go down there, he just happened to get that clip. He finally got a clip of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing.
He came back to Yakima because he was living in Yakima when he got the clip of it. Him and Bob Gimlin. And, everybody the word was out to his friends and everything. You know, he said Roger got that thing on film. He actually got it. And my dad was going, "You're kidding." So we actually went to his house, and I'll never forget it. He had a movie projector. It didn't have no sound, which this was 16 millimeter. He set it up in his living room, and before he showed that clip, he had clips. He had film on that same roll of film. He had films of his kids playing, and that toy I was telling you about he invented. He was showing his kids playing with it.
Okay.
And then on that same roll, all of a sudden, here comes Bigfoot. And this is the original. I mean, this is the raw film. This is not made a copy of a copy. This is actually the real clip of it right there. I mean, I saw it.
Wow. So you saw history.
I never forget we were all in the living room, the lights were out, and it was just something else to see the real, because, you know, it was different. It was almost like a brown color in the film.
Yeah. Yeah, on some of the pictures it looks black, but I've got a book here called The Bigfoot Film Controversy by Christopher Murphy, and
right.
And he's actually got some of the still photographs taken from the film.
Right.
And it's really kind of a dark brown.
Exactly. When Roger was, after he got that, then everybody wanted to jump on the wagon. Everybody was ready to go with him on it. You know, big investors, and I mean, he was getting calls from everybody. Everybody was a friend of Roger then. You know.
Right.
Then you had the other people that said he was crazy and he made it up. You know, but most people that said that didn't really understand the what was on that film. A manager that managed my dad for years with Gene Vincent and all those guys, his name was Pat Mason. He lived in Seaside, Oregon. Well, Dad introduced him to Roger, and Pat went down to Hollywood with Roger with the film, and Roger went on a lot of TV shows. On that one show called To Tell the Truth. That's the one where
is that Art Linkletter's show?
People come. Pardon me?
Was that Art Linkletter's show?
I don't believe it was Art Linkletter, but it was called Tell the Truth, and there was like a panel of people, and then there would be three people come out, and they would say, "My name is Roger Patterson." The other person would say, "My name is Roger Patterson." Then they would ask them questions, and the thing was, when on that particular show, they had like big mountain men-looking people with big beards, and Roger was only like I think 5 foot tall. So when he went on that show, here they come out. My name is Roger Patterson. They had another guy with looked like a mountain man. No, my name is Roger Patterson. And they had to try to guess who was the one that. And then actually Roger stood up at the end. But he went down to Hollywood. He got on a lot of shows. I think Dad even said that he went on the Johnny Carson show. And Johnny Carson, before he went out, Johnny backstage was making fun of Bigfoot. And Roger got in an argument with Johnny Carson and actually walked out of the show and said, "Well, I'm not going to go on." He didn't even go on the show.
Oh, wow.
See, that's how involved Roger was with Bigfoot. I mean, he took it real serious, and he was really offended by that because everybody was making a big joke. That was a big, Bigfoot,
Right. Well, I mean, if he had been some hoaxer, he would have taken any opportunity he could.
Right. And, back to the story of Pat Mason, the promoter knew everybody in Hollywood. I mean, he knew Elvis, Colonel Tom Parker. He knew all the people at these big movie companies. So he took that clip, the film, and he took it actually without Roger knowing it because Roger knew he was trying to do stuff with it, but he took it to a company without Roger being there, and he said he got some of the special effects people there, and he said, let's put this thing on here. I want to get some of your top people here. This is like a big movie company. He said, I want you to take this and blow this thing up and take a look at that and see what you think. And they put that on. They didn't know what to do. Their mouth dropped open. They said they never saw anything so real as that. And this is a big movie company talking here.
Wow.
See, that's way before the digital stuff. Back then, there was no digital. Nowadays they can take a movie and do digital stuff, and it looks just as like they could actually make it look real. But back then, if you just to try to fake something like that would be even the movie company said they could never make nothing that looked as real with the muscles and the legs and the arms and everything.
Yeah, and that's what people I don't think understand a lot of the time is that this film. I mean, it's a short film. I think it's less than a minute long, I believe.
Yeah, it's real quick.
But it shows the muscles moving under the skin.
Oh yeah.
And
they went down there and I believe it was. I'm trying to think. It was a couple people went down there at that same spot where Roger filmed that. He told them where it was at and went down there with them, whatever. And they measured They took somebody in that same position, and then they measured the trees and everything. And time they got through measured, this is back in the '60s now, before they had all this digital. That thing must have been 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
So, you hear stories, well, it was so-and-so in the suit. Well, most people that said that, they wasn't no 7 feet tall.
Well, that's right. And
so,
it's so sad because this is an amazing piece of photographic evidence.
It never dies out, though. I mean, no matter what. I was watching that TV show called Castle. They did a thing about Bigfoot, and I was watching with my wife there, and we saw in the show they showed that shot of Roger, that he took. I'm thinking, man, that thing never dies out. It's such a film that, like I said, people can't understand how he did it, and they're saying, well, is it real or is it fake? Is it real or is it fake? It's driving, it's just, that's why I say the scientists, they're scratching their head all the time,
Right.
They want to prove it's fake, but they can't do it.
Right.
They just can't do it.
It has never been debunked. There has never been anybody proven that the film is a fake. Roger Patterson died in 72 or something like that.
Yeah, it was a sad time for the family. I remember that. Before he passed away, his health was really going downhill like a year before he died, but he was still wanting to look for it. I mean, this is after this has been on every market, every TV show. Roger, if he was faking it in the condition that his health was in, I don't believe he'd want to go out looking for Bigfoot.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
And, I remember one time, this is a story that happened. Me and my dad was up hunting. We were bow hunting, and up above Roger's house, a place called Tampico. And I thought I saw something on the hill walking. My dad said, I'm always seeing Bigfoot. He always said. I could have sworn that looked like somebody, I'm just an excited kid,
Right.
So I get back home, and I called Roger without my dad knowing it. And Roger calls Dad up, and I'll never forget this. Dad saying, why did you call Roger? Now he's going to make us go back up there. And it was like 3 or 4 foot of snow, and Roger got a hold of his brother. I think it was Lauren. He got a hold of his brother, and they said, we're going to go up, and Roger sat in the vehicle because his health was really bad. He had a big walkie-talkie, and he gave his brother one, and he wanted us to go up and show where I thought I saw this thing walking on the side of this hill up there. But, that's the way Roger was.
That shows his dedication to it.
Right, exactly. And I got so many stories I could tell you about when he was always he was trying to interview many people about this thing. And I was almost like his scout, you might say. If I heard somebody say they saw one, I always call Roger and tell him.
Well, what were your reactions when you saw the film? If you can, because you were what, 10, I guess, when you saw the film.
I was around 10, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm 58 right now. Yeah.
Yeah, what were you thinking? If you can remember.
I was just crazy about it. I mean, I couldn't. I went nuts over it as a kid, and I was just telling I was just constantly. That's why I was trying to be as much of help as I could to Roger when he was always looking for Bigfoot. I said, if I see anything or I hear anything, I'm going to be calling you. So, and I'd stay a lot of times at their house up there, and Roger would be working on some things that he had a truck that he converted into like a search. It was like he'd use for his expeditions.
Okay.
And he had like binoculars set up on a. It was like a swivel chair, and he had a set of binoculars set up on that where you wouldn't have to hold them.
Oh wow!
So where you could sit there and look without holding your arms up constantly. Because you'd sit there and swirl around the top, and he had this thing on top of his truck. But it was a big truck. It was like a big. I don't know what kind of truck it was, like a big bread truck or something he bought used, and he fixed it up for
like an old panel truck, yeah.
To go look for Bigfoot. And he had everything you can imagine in that thing. I remember he got 2 tranquilizer guns, and that's what his goal was, to try to. He didn't have the tranquilizers back when he got the film of it, because back then Roger didn't have a lot of finances for that kind of stuff. But after he got the film, then he started being able to do that, and then he bought the tranquilizer guns later, and he bought these tranquilizer guns, and he had this big German Shepherd dog. I guess he accidentally shot the dog or something, or the dog there, and the dog slept for 3 days or something like that. Everybody said, he was just testing it out to see what would happen if he shot Bigfoot.
That dog probably woke up with the biggest headache.
But he was always, like I said, that was his. I mean, day and night, Roger. He breathed it. That was Roger's life, looking for Bigfoot.
Wow. And he made history, and you got to see it before anybody else. That's incredibly cool.
It was something else, and then, he'd come down to my dad's place. My dad always had an office set up. We had a western ghost town that Dad developed called Dry Gulch Movie Town, and there was a lot of stars coming in there. Dad knew a lot of people in Hollywood. So Dad brought in one time. He brought in Robert Fuller. You remember him? He was on the.
Oh.
He was a big actor. He was like he was in the modern show he was in was the Emergency. He was a doctor in the hospital, but he was also in the westerns, Wagon Train, or one of those shows like that. But then he brought him, and he brought also James Jury from the Virginian.
Right.
Dad brought both of those stars out there, and this town Yakima was a farming community. It wasn't a very big town back then. It was like maybe 60,000 population. So Dad gets a hold of the city, and he says, "Hey, I got some movie stars coming in. You guys need to try to get together, get some people down there and welcome them, have a welcome for them." And they didn't believe him. They said, "Nah, Dad, I'm not making this," because he dealt with these guys were on TV on the regular network, back then. They were the top stars.
Yeah.
Sure enough, this plane came in, and then Yakima finally realized. They came down there, and here's these 2 big actors coming off with their cowboy outfits on and come out waving.
Well, But
we had this ghost town. That kind of comes back to Roger again. And Roger thought it was a neat place because Dad had an office. So Roger would come down to Dad's office and do a lot of his calls, and Dad would help him with a lot of connections in Hollywood and different things. And that's where the story got started, that Jerry Merritt must have known somebody in Hollywood that helped him make this suit.
Oh, yeah.
See, how people can put one thing together. Well,
they put 1 and 1 together and come up with 3.
Here's Jerry Merritt. He knows people in Hollywood. He's having movie stars come out there. Roger's going down there. That's how Roger got this film. He had Jerry Merritt make the suit. See, that's where that came into play on some of these books you read. And I crack up every time I see stuff like that, because I know good and well my dad, he was no part of that. He didn't even know Roger even got the shot of it. And when he did, Roger used to ask Dad to go with him to California and go on some of their trips down there, and Dad would always say, well, I'm busy, I'm doing this and that. But so, if you read stuff in those books about that, that's how that came in.
Okay. Well, that's. I mean, your dad was a good friend to him, and
he was. He knew him for years, and all. Yeah, my uncles knew him. They, like I said, they were rodeo riders when they were back in their teens, late teens, and whatever. And Dad went into the Army, come back out, got in the music business, and then Roger always kept in contact with him. Roger was a singer himself. He did some singing, and he wrote a couple songs. And I talked to Roger's wife, Patricia, not a couple years ago, and she said she had a tape of the one that Roger did of the song that he wrote, and Dan was helping him play on it or something. And she wanted me to get a copy of that, so I need to contact her on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I believe you said you've got some of Roger's reel-to-reel tapes where he was interviewing?
I've got it's a reel-to-reel, just the audio, like a 7.5 speed, maybe a 3 1/3. But it's just an old tape that Roger went around and interviewed people, and I got one of them where he's interviewing like 2 or 3 people. I got it right here in front of me here.
Oh, that's cool.
He's this actually has his name right on the box, and it was probably something that ended up my dad's studio. And the sighting of a female on Lewis River, 10 miles from Ape Canyon, and it's got Cumberland Nelson. This is Roger Patterson on the box, so I need to have that transferred.
Yeah, that's a piece of history. I mean, it's Roger on tape interviewing somebody who had a sighting. That's amazing. That is, I'd love to hear that.
I talked to my uncle. He lives. I call him once in a while. It's my mom's brother, and he lived right between. This is kind of weird here. He lived right. Bob Gimlin, the one that was with Roger when they got the California film.
Right.
And just over from there is another guy named Bob Aronymous. Bob Aronymous. He was a friend with Roger and Dad back when they were shooting, just put together expeditions and things like that. But later on, after Roger passed away and everything's said and done, he comes out of the woodwork and said, "I'm in that suit. That's me walking."
Right. Yeah, that's really sad.
So my uncle lives right between the two of them, and my uncle bought a Bigfoot camper, and he went over to Bob Aronymous. He said, "Well, you said you're Bigfoot. Come over and sign your name to this camper."
Yeah. Well, did he come over and sign it?
I think he did. I think he put it on there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, there's not, like I said, there's so many things that went on out there, and as far as the sightings, I could tell you stories about that. All, people I knew that actually saw it, and I saw some things that I believe it was Bigfoot. But
well, the one where Roger came up and investigated, did anything come from that?
Well, what happened was my mom said she always she had a curtain she'd always pull at night, and at our house she went to pull the curtain one night and she saw something out there looking at her, and she just freaked out. I mean, I remember her really hysterical on my dad to calm her down and everything. And well, when she called Roger, Dad called Roger. This is before Roger, the famous Bigfoot film. This is way before that. Roger started coming down to our place, and he would stay all night there. He has one little bedroom down there, and he had one of them old-time cameras like those old reporters used to carry with a big round flash thing on it,
Right. Oh, yeah.
Roger had that. He'd come down, he'd bring stuff like that, and he said, "I'm going to camp out in this room tonight, and everybody else elsewhere, I'm going to be right here. I'm going to wait for this thing to come around the window again." But he was always coming down there looking around for tracks and different things, and
Wow.
there's quite the stories there.
A lot of great stories. A lot of great stories.
You know, and a lot of people say, "Well, how come I never saw Bigfoot?" But when you go to the Northwest, it's the mountains are so dense in different areas out there, so rugged. Most of the time out there, to prove how rugged it is, you don't even hardly see a. You're lucky if you ever saw a bear in your lifetime out there.
Right.
Or like a cougar. And I would ask that question to a lot of people out there. You know, they'd say, "I never saw a Bigfoot," and I always would say, "Well, when was the last time you saw a bear?" And they would look at me and go, "I never have." So, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
When was the last time you saw a cougar? They would say the same thing. "I've never saw a cougar." Come think about it. I said, "Well,
I remember a quote from Peter Byrne, who was a Bigfoot searcher, and at that time, now this was probably in the early 70s, there were over 50 planes that were officially reported as lost in the Pacific Northwest. That's how dense the forest is. If a plane goes down, they can't find it, and they list it as lost.
Mount St. Helens blew. I was 80 miles from there, and I was. We used to go camping up in Mount St. Helens, and
wow,
you talk about rugged country up there. I mean, those trees were so big and thick. I mean, I'm thinking that's why there's a place up there actually called Ape Canyon, because it was known for Bigfoot.
Right.
And when that mountain blew, they think maybe, I don't know if a lot of them, they think maybe some were killed or there's a lot of animals. Because I mean, when that blew, it was like atomic bombs. I don't know if you ever saw any.
I saw footage of it. Yeah, I sure did. And
the National Geographic did a really big story about that, and they had shots that people took. That's unbelievable. That it folds out in the National Geographic, and that's back in I believe 1982 when they did the magazine. But you know, the mountain went off in May 18th.
It blew a lot of the mountain away, didn't it? If I remember correctly. And actually, I said it blew a lot of the mountain away, if I remember correctly.
Almost half the whole side of it.
Yeah.
And you know, if you ever go out there and go in front of a Mount Rainier or any of those mountains, it just takes your breath away to look at them. And they're so. But they did the article January 1981. It's a National Geographic. If you ever get that, Roger talks a lot in his book that he wrote about Ape Camp and about some stories that went on. Yeah.
Right.
Michael, I was trying to think of the guy that died on the mountain. Wasn't it Harry Truman or somebody like that?
Yeah, Harry Truman. He had a resort up there, right on Spirit Lake up there, and they tried to talk him into coming off there and leaving, and he wouldn't do it. He was stubborn. He said, "I'll just stay right here," and he was in the paper about every day up there. Because they knew that mountain was going to finally blow, and it was erupting every day. I mean, you could see smoke, but it wasn't like the big eruption. The big eruption is like the whole mountain just came.
Right.
And when it came and blew in Yakima, it was about 2 inches of powdered. The ash was more like a sand, like a real fine powdered sand.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't like ashes of a fire. It was like powdered sand. And you could hold your hand down; it would just fill your hand up as it's falling. And this went on for a long. When it blew in the morning, like around 8 o'clock or 8:30 or something like that. And when it finally came to Yakima, Yakima became dark, and it was dark just like in the middle of the night. You couldn't see anything.
Wow.
This was at noon, 12 o'clock noon during the day. The roads were just covered like snow of this powdered sand.
Yeah. And
the trees were just weighted down. The limbs were just hanging. And it was a mess. It was something else.
Wow! And he stayed up on the mountain instead of getting off the mountain.
He stayed at that little resort. That resort was below the mountain, and there's a place called the Spirit Lake. There was a really beautiful lake up there, and he had a really beautiful lodge up there. And he just, he'd been there all his life probably, and just didn't want to leave. Well, he's been seeing these small eruptions, and he said the small eruptions are going over me. He said it's not going to do anything, and when it finally went, it just was like an atomic bomb. The trees, you can think of some of the biggest trees you see here in Tennessee. They were laying down like toothpicks for miles.
Wow.
That's how powerful it was.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I remember reading that as a result of the eruption, a canyon was formed.
Oh yeah.
And it was 1/40th the size of the Grand Canyon, but it formed just like in a week or
Right.
two. It was amazing.
And on the other side of the mountain, where it didn't blow that side of the mountain out, they got all the mudslides because all the snow and everything started melting up there, and it took them by surprise, and it just came down through there and just devastating. It was taking logging trucks and like toys, you know. It was just so much mud and logs and debris coming down through that down in a place called Cougar, Washington.
Excuse me. Well, you have got some amazing stories, Larry, about Roger Patterson, and I wanted to circle back real quick.
Sure.
While we've got just a few minutes left, and I wanted to mention Bob Hieronymus again, because he does claim, as you said, to be the man in the suit.
You know, I got a call. This is back, I think it was 1997, 99. Dad called me and he said, "Hey, there's a guy out here in Washington. He's making a book about Bigfoot, and he wants to do an interview with you and your mom." And my dad and my mom divorced, and he said he's going to be calling you. His name's Greg Long. And I said, "Oh, I'm excited. I was excited about it, So this guy calls me up and he starts asking me questions, and I'm telling him things, kind of like I'm telling you, And he was on the phone for quite a while, and then later on, I talked to somebody, and they said, "Hey, you don't know about this. This guy is going against Roger. He's putting out this book that's showing that it was all made up, and your dad was involved in it, and because he even came to my dad's house in Washougal or Camas, Washington, and did an interview with my dad, and he was writing the story down in the book, pretty much what we're saying, but he would just twist it around enough to make it look like we were talking kind of,
Yeah.
I wasn't happy with it, I'll put it that way.
Right. I don't blame you. My understanding is that he did that to a lot of people, that he would
he
would present himself as a Bigfoot researcher.
That lived around Roger, and, there was a lot of people that thought Roger was crazy, and they thought my dad was crazy. Because my dad was building a western ghost town out in the middle of nowhere in Washington State, all places. And here's this ghost town being put up as a saloon and all this. It was almost like the movie with Kevin Costner, Build It and They'll Come,
Right, exactly.
So here's Dad building this ghost town with a lot of people involved in it, and Roger's looking for a Bigfoot. All these neighbors around there, they thought our families were crazy.
Yeah.
And I was ridiculed at school and everything. It was a rough.
Oh.
Because here's Roger looking for this Bigfoot, and here's so it was a crazy childhood I went through. But it's something that I never want to take back. It's just
right
that I enjoyed being around, and
yeah, you got to be around Roger Patterson, who made history. You got to see the history
his kids,
when it was
his son Clint and Brad. And he had a daughter named Sabrina. No, they were real close friends of mine. I mean, we would just go out and work on things and ride horses, and we were just the closest friends you can get.
Wow, that's great. That's great. Well, let me circle back real quick to Bob Hieronymus again, because we've just got a few minutes left.
Sure, go ahead.
And in that book, and I think it's called The Making of Bigfoot by Greg Long.
Yeah.
I don't recommend anybody buy it, but Bob Hieronymus says, "I was the one in the suit," and he apparently says in the book, "I wore my clothes under the suit."
Oh yeah.
And, well, that just proves him wrong right there, because with clothes on under that suit, you wouldn't see the muscle movements.
Well, and then it goes back to what I was mentioning about earlier about when they went down there and they measured the trees of the thing walking, and that thing had to have been 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
Well, Bob Hieronymus is only probably 5'9".
Yeah.
So
he could not have been a man in the suit. It's just wrong.
Right.
And
and Roger, I'll go back to this real quick here. Roger liked to react things, and he would do that with me. So a lot of people would take it wrong on that and say, well, he was just acting like, and like you'd say, well, he wasn't at Ape Canyon. He wasn't there. He would show what it was like if he was there. He even had he even had me down and kind of things. Okay, walk like you're walking. I'm going to watch you from here and see what it would. He reacted things like that.
Okay.
So it was.
He was being thorough.
And I don't know, maybe him and Bob Thomas, when they were, at the earlier, they were involved with Roger a little bit there, and they had, matter of fact, there's a famous picture of, it shows Roger, shows my dad, or it shows, I'm just going by what I'm remembering, it shows Roger, John Ballard, my dad Jerry, and I believe the Ronimuses, there's Bob and his brother, Howard, I believe his name was, and they're all sitting on horses between two big pine trees.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever saw that shot.
No, I never have, I don't think.
Yeah. Matter of fact, if you see some clips of Rogers, some of the things they showed in some of those documentaries, it shows a bunch of people coming off the hill riding horses.
Uh-huh.
One of those is my dad riding on in that.
Oh, cool.
And another thing, I'll mention this real quick, and I don't want to... this goes back to Nashville here. There's a big producer here in town. He produces Jason Aldean. His name's Michael Knox.
Okay.
Okay, his dad was Buddy Knox. Had the song Party Doll.
Okay.
Okay, his dad was Buddy, and Buddy was one of my dad's best friends. They were like brothers. Well, Buddy, when he'd be traveling on the road, he would come to our house and stay for 2 or 3 days at a time. And he would go with Dad and want to go with Roger and look for Bigfoot.
Wow.
So Buddy was really, he was really enthused about it. I got pictures of Buddy over at our ghost town. And matter of fact, I took some down to Michael Knox down here at Warner Chapel. And I had a bunch of pictures of his dad sitting out there with a Western outfit on. And Michael was really just excited to get those pictures. But yeah, Buddy was really into looking for Bigfoot.
That's very cool.
All these people that come out to see my dad, Gene Vincent, he was a big star. He was on Capitol, and he had Gene Vincent, the Blue Caps, but he'd come to our place, and he always had his eyes wide open. Is there Bigfoot out here,
So your dad was known as a Bigfooter.
Oh, that was a big conversation when he came to our place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Larry, you have got a lot of great stories. I'd love to have you back on the show in the near future, but we are just about out of time.
Okay, and I appreciate it. I hope I didn't ramble all along.
No, we appreciate you, and thank you for your time.
You bet, and I appreciate coming on the radio station, and I enjoy the station, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. We'll talk to you soon.
Oh, you bet. Okay, bye now.
Bye-bye. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening today. That was Larry Merritt. We appreciate him so much for his time and taking the time to come on and tell us all those great stories. And sounds like we could get probably 3 or 4 shows out of him, and we'll do it in the future because that was a great talk. And we'll talk more about Roger Patterson in the future. Thank you all so very, very much for being here today.
We hope you have enjoyed your visit with us here at Bigfoot Crossing. The internet home for Bigfoot Crossing can be found at www.bigfootcrossing.net. Michael Willey's website, Bigfoot in Tennessee, can be found at www.tnbigfoot.net. Please follow us on Facebook at Bigfoot Tennessee. You can also follow Michael Willey on Twitter. His handle is at Michael B. Willey. Each episode of Bigfoot Crossing is posted to the Bigfoot Crossing YouTube channel. Please subscribe so you can be notified when new episodes are posted. Your feedback is always welcome. Please email questions and comments to tnsasquatch@gmail.com. Be sure to let us know which episode you have a question or comment about. Thanks for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next time right here at Bigfoot Crossing.